The studio lights were warmer than usual that morning, bathing the set of the Tamron Hall show in a soft, almost deceptive glow. Everything looked calm on the surface, perfect smiles, polished floors, producers moving quietly with headsets pressed to their ears. But beneath that smooth television sheen, tension was already simmering. Meghan Markle sat in the guest chair, her posture straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a tailored ivory blazer that cameras loved, clean, elegant, intentional. From the outside, she looked composed, confident, every inch the media-trained public figure. But inside, her thoughts were sharp, alert, guarded. She had agreed to this interview reluctantly. For weeks, Meghan's team had gone back and forth with Tamron Hall's producers. The official pitch was simple, a thoughtful conversation about Meghan's latest advocacy work, motherhood, and life after stepping back from royal duties. But Meghan had been in this game long enough to recognize the subtext. When ratings dipped, controversy always followed. Still, she came. Across from her, Tamron Hall flipped through her cue cards with a practiced ease. Years in broadcast journalism had taught her how to smile while preparing to ask the question everyone else was afraid to voice. Tamron prided herself on being fair, but fair didn't mean soft. And today, she sensed an opportunity. The cameras rolled. The first 10 minutes went exactly as planned. Tamron asked about Meghan's charity initiatives, her children, how she balanced public life with private motherhood. Meghan answered smoothly, her voice measured, occasionally warm. The audience nodded along. Social media lit up with polite approval. Then Tamron leaned back slightly in her chair. "So, Meghan," she said, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly, "there's been a lot of discussion lately, renewed discussion, about accountability." Meghan felt it immediately. That tightening in her chest. The change in temperature. Accountability. She repeated calmly. "Yes," Tamron continued. "Critics say that whenever difficult situations arise, whether it's with the royal family, former staff, or even media partners, you often position yourself solely as the victim. Some former colleagues claim they've never been able to respond publicly without backlash." The studio went quiet. Meghan's smile didn't fade, but it hardened. "I don't agree with that framing," she said carefully. "Speaking about personal experiences isn't the same as avoiding accountability." Tamron nodded, as if she expected that answer. "But what about the people who say your truth came at their expense? Palace aides, for example, who say your narrative painted them as villains without giving them a voice." There it was. Meghan uncrossed her hands. "With respect, Tamron, those people do have a voice. They've had institutions, tabloids, and anonymous briefings protecting them for decades." A murmur rippled through the audience. Tamron didn't interrupt, but she didn't retreat either. "Some would argue that anonymity exists because of power dynamics, not guilt." Meghan's eyes sharpened. "And some would argue that silence is often enforced, not chosen." The exchange was still civil, but producers were already shifting in their seats. This wasn't the gentle conversation they'd promoted. Tamron pressed on. "Let's talk about your relationship with the media," she said. "You've criticized press intrusion, yet you've also signed major deals with streaming platforms and publishers. How do you reconcile that contradiction?" Meghan inhaled slowly. "I don't believe telling your story on your own terms is contradictory," she replied. "It's survival." "But isn't there a difference," Tamron countered, "between survival and control?" That word landed like a spark. Near gasoline. Meghan leaned forward slightly. "Control has been used as a weaponized term against women, especially women of color, who dare to speak clearly and set boundaries." The audience applauded, but Tamron's expression remained steady. "This isn't about gender or race," Tamron said. "It's about credibility. There are documented inconsistencies between interviews. Timelines that don't align." Meghan's jaw tightened. "Trauma doesn't follow a neat timeline," she said firmly. "If we're going to interrogate survivors for imperfect recollection, we should be honest about what that says about society." Now the energy had shifted completely. Tamron crossed her legs, her voice calm but resolute. "Some people watching would say you're deflecting." Meghan's composure cracked. "Just a fraction." "I'm not deflecting," she said. "I'm explaining." "Well," Tamron replied, "explanations invite questions." There it was, the line neither of them could step back from. Meghan straightened in her chair. "Then ask your questions. But don't dress accusations up as curiosity." A collective inhale swept the studio. Tamron raised her eyebrows slightly. That's not fair, Meghan. No, Meghan shot back, what's not fair is pretending this conversation is neutral. The director's voice crackled urgently through headsets backstage. We're losing control. Tamron leaned forward now, her journalist instincts fully engaged. Are you saying this interview was a setup? I'm saying, Meghan replied slowly, that I was promised a conversation about my work, not a cross-examination built on tabloid narratives. Tamron's smile disappeared. As a journalist, she said, it's my job to ask what others won't. And as a guest, Meghan said, her voice steady but unmistakably cold, it's my right to refuse being misrepresented. The audience sat frozen. For a brief moment, neither woman spoke. Cameras captured every micro-expression, the tightening around Meghan's eyes, the controlled irritation in Tamron's posture. Then Tamron said the words that changed everything. If you can't handle tough questions, she said, perhaps public platforms aren't the right place to seek sympathy. Meghan blinked once. Sympathy. She stood up. Gasps echoed across the studio. I didn't come here seeking sympathy, Meghan said quietly. I came here seeking honesty. And this, she gestured around the set, is not it. Tamron stood as well, surprised despite herself. Meghan, sit down. We're live. Meghan turned toward the cameras. I won't be spoken to like this, she said. Not anymore. Producers rushed toward the stage, whispering urgently. One of them reached for Meghan's arm, then hesitated. Tamron's voice hardened. Walking out won't help your image. Meghan looked back at her, eyes blazing. Neither will staying. A beat of silence. Then a voice cut through the chaos, the senior producer, pale and shaking. Meghan, we're going to take a break. Meghan shook her head. No. You're going to escort me out. The words hung heavy in the air. Security stepped forward, uncertain. Tamron stared, stunned, not angry, but caught off guard by how fast control had slipped away. You're kicking me out? Meghan asked softly, incredulously. The producer swallowed. For the sake of the show, yes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Meghan let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course. She picked up her bag, shoulders squared, dignity intact despite the humiliation burning beneath her skin. As she walked off stage, the cameras cut to black, but microphones still caught her final words. This is exactly what I was talking about. And just like that, the interview that was supposed to be a redemption arc became something else entirely, a moment that would ignite headlines, divide audiences, and leave one explosive question hanging in the air. The moment Meghan disappeared behind the black curtain, the studio erupted into controlled chaos. Producers shouted over one another, headsets crackling with panic. Assistants rushed to switch camera feeds while the audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, boo, or simply stare at the blank screens now flashing the show's logo. Tamron Hall remained standing in the center of the stage. For a full 5 seconds, she said nothing. Millions were still watching. Finally, she turned toward the main camera, her face composed but pale around the edges. We're going to take a short break, she said carefully. When we return, we'll address what just happened. The red light blinked off. As soon as it did, Tamron exhaled sharply and dropped into her chair. What the hell just happened? She demanded. A senior producer ran over, voice low but urgent. Her team is already backstage. They're furious. They're saying we blindsided her. Tamron laughed once, short and disbelieving. Blindsided. Those questions were approved. Approved themes, the producer corrected. Not wording. Tamron rubbed her temples. She'd done confrontational interviews before. Politicians. Celebrities. People far less fragile under pressure. But something about Meghan Markle had detonated faster than anyone expected. Backstage, Meghan stood near her dressing room, phone pressed to her ear. Her publicist's voice spilled out in rapid bursts. Twitter was exploding, hashtags forming by the second. Hashtag Tamron vs Meghan. Hashtag Justice for Meghan. Hashtag WalkoutGate. Meghan closed her eyes. This is exactly what they wanted, she said quietly. No, her publicist replied. This is what you gave them. Now we control the narrative. Meghan opened her eyes, jaw tightening. I'm done letting people interrogate my pain for ratings. Security hovered awkwardly a few feet away, unsure whether they were still meant to escort her, or protect her. Outside the studio, paparazzi had already gathered, alerted by leaks that traveled faster than official statements ever could. Cameras flashed the moment Meghan stepped through the exit, her expression unreadable, sunglasses hiding eyes that were burning with equal parts anger and resolve. Within an hour, clips flooded social media. Not the full context. Just moments. Tamron's line, "If you can't handle tough questions." Meghan standing up. The word, "kicked out," splashed across thumbnails in bold red letters. Commentators chose sides instantly. "She can dish it out but can't take it," one pundit scoffed on a cable news panel. Another fired back, "This is what happens when a woman refuses to be humiliated on live TV." By evening, the story had gone global. Meanwhile, inside the network headquarters, executives gathered around a long glass table, faces lit by screens replaying the walkout on loop. Ratings for the episode had spiked, but so had complaints. "This is a PR nightmare," one executive said. "It's also our highest engagement this quarter," another replied coldly. Tamron was called into the meeting. She walked in composed, but defensive energy hung around her like static. "I did my job," she said before anyone could accuse her otherwise. "I asked fair questions. You asked combustible ones," an executive countered. "And you lost your guest on live television." Tamron crossed her arms. "So what? We're supposed to tiptoe around powerful people now." Silence followed. Then the network's legal advisor spoke. "Meghan's team is considering releasing their own footage. Behind-the-scenes audio. That changed everything." Tamron's stomach dropped. Back at home, Meghan sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, tea untouched. Harry stood nearby, arms folded, watching clips play silently on the screen. "They're calling you difficult," he said. Softly. Meghan smiled bitterly. "They always do when I don't play the role they wrote." Her team had assembled virtually, PR strategists, lawyers, advisors. One of them shared a screen, a drafted statement. Meghan read it once. Then again. "No," she said. "This is too polite." She leaned forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I want people to understand why I walked out." Her statement went live just before midnight. It didn't attack Tamron directly. It didn't name the network. Instead, it spoke about boundaries. About how trauma becomes entertainment. About how women are praised for resilience but punished for resistance. By morning, the internet had shifted. Not completely, but enough. Former guests came forward, hinting they too had felt pressured into uncomfortable conversations. A former staffer anonymously claimed the show encouraged emotional escalation. Then came the leak. A short backstage clip, grainy audio, Meghan's voice calm but firm, a producer apologizing for pushing harder than agreed. The word, "kicked out," suddenly didn't sound so simple. Tamron watched the clip alone in her office, heart pounding. This wasn't how she wanted to be remembered, not as someone accused of exploiting pain. She released her own statement hours later. It was professional, careful, expressed regret, not for the questions, but for how the situation unfolded. Critics called it insufficient. Supporters called it dignified. The truth, as always, lived somewhere messier in between. Weeks later, the dust still hadn't fully settled. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history, but sponsors quietly pulled back. Tamron remained on air, but her interviews softened, scrutiny unmistakable. Meghan, meanwhile, stayed silent. Until she didn't. At a speaking engagement months later, she addressed the incident without naming names. "I learned something important," she told the audience. "You don't owe anyone access to your wounds. Walking away is not weakness. Sometimes, it's power." The crowd rose to its feet. Backstage, her team exchanged knowing looks. The narrative had shifted again. Not because the controversy disappeared, but because Meghan refused to be defined by it. And somewhere in a quiet studio office, Tamron Hall watched the clip of that speech on her phone, lips pressed thin, wondering the same question millions still debated. Was it a journalist pushing too hard? Or a woman finally refusing to stay seated? Either way, one thing was undeniable. That fiery exchange had changed them both. Fire.